Hi everyone, my name is Monica Taylor, and I'm really excited to be participating in the Save the Crafty YouTuber Video Hop. YouTube recently changed some of their monetization rules, and a lot of the crafty YouTube channels were affected. We decided to pool our resources and put together this video hop to introduce you to some of the channels that you might be missing out on. Now, some of the names in the hop you might recognize, but we're hoping that we're going to bring you some amazing new tutorials from artists you may have never seen before. So don't forget to hit my subscribe button. And after you're finished watching my video, you're going to be able to click the link in the video description below to check out the next person on the list. The more videos you watch and comment on, the better your chances are to win one of over 120 prizes. So let's get started. One of my favorite techniques in card making is to create layered cards. And you can create layers not only with paper, but with stamps, ephemera, and metal objects as well. There's so many items that you can layer your cards with. It just depends on how bulky you want them to be. So today we're going to go ahead and create a vintage inspired layered card using some Tim Holtz paper as well as some of his Idea-ology. I'm also going to be showing you some of the techniques that I use to create my vintage cards. So to begin, when I'm creating a vintage card, I typically will use cardstock that is more of a tan or brown tone. I also like to have my paper look a little bit grungy, so there's a couple of ways that I can do that. You can easily tear the edges of your paper, or you can use one of the distressing tools to fray your edges. This tool is great because it will help age your paper as well as give it somewhat of a torn look. You can also use sanding blocks or sandpaper, as well as some of the distress inks that I'm showing you here. Now, when you're using some of your tools to distress your cardstock, you don't want to have a soft hand. You really want to take that tool and rub it against the edges of your cardstock so that way it will rip and fray really nicely. After you've frayed it, you can even go back and curl some of your edges or even tear some of your paper. Remember, the idea is to make your paper look old, and you want to distress it. So torn edges or curled edges are great effects. Another way that you can distress your paper is to use distress ink. Now, I typically like to use a couple of colors. The colors that I like to use are the Walnut Stain or the Vintage Photo, and I find that the distress ink works a lot better than the distress oxides. Now you can use a distress oxide, but the distress ink will just come in a little bit darker. Now for this layered card, I'm using 3 layers of cardstock. And as you can see, I've cut them different sizes. And even though this cardstock does have some print on it, I am still going to come in and add some stamping layers. Now, one of the types of stamps that I like to use when I'm creating vintage cards or layered cards are numbers. Numbers are great additions because not only do they add interest, but they don't really take away a focal point. You can easily layer over your numbers and it will still have a great effect. So after I finished adding my distress ink to my cardstock, I did pull out my MISTI tool to stamp some numbers on the first layer. Now I know a lot of people have a problem with covering an area that they may have already stamped. But when you're creating layers, you are going to be covering some of those stamped areas. But keep in mind, you're stamping to create interest, not necessarily to create a focal point. So even though I'm stamping these numbers, some of the stamped area might get covered, and that's okay. And while most of the stamping might be random, if there is a particular image or a stamp that you do want to show, make sure that you lay out your card before you actually stamp, so that way you can be sure that it will show before you add the rest of your layers. Now, another technique that I like to use when I'm creating layered cards is to add some washi tape. Washi tape can be really decorative, but it can also be a great adhesive to help hold down your layers of cardstock. The stamp set that I'm using from Tim Holtz is one of my favorite stamp sets, and I want to say it's called ETCETERA. It is great for layering stamps, and I use it often on my cards. Not only do they have smaller stamps, which are the ones that I'm using here, but they also have some larger pieces that you can use for backgrounds. Now, one of the stamps that I'm going to be using here is this 15-cent stamp. And I knew I was going to be also adding a bigger piece of ephemera, which was that photo booth image. So I went ahead and I tested where my ephemera was going to go to ensure that my 15-cent stamp wouldn't be covered up completely. Now to grunge up this photo booth image just a bit, I did take that sanding block and I scratched over the images. Again, I wanted to grunge it up just a bit, and that sanding block worked great. I also had this wood piece that I had in my stash, and it was a great frame for the focal image. So one of the last layers that I add on my cards is, of course, my sentiment. And I do those last because I want to make sure that you can read those. On layered cards, that's the one thing that you don't want to cover up is your sentiment, because that's the message that you're trying to get across. The quote that I'm using is from one of the quote chips from the Tim Holtz collection, and it reads "Story." And I decided to create my own sentiment using some of the letter labels as well. The letter labels are probably one of my favorite items to use when I'm creating sentiments, because I can create exactly what I want it to say on my card. Once I add all of my labels, my final sentiment is going to read "Tell Your Story." And I thought it was a great addition to this card. So if you've enjoyed my video, I would sure appreciate a thumbs up. And if you didn't hit that subscribe button earlier, don't forget to do that before you head out. We've had some very generous sponsors participate in our video hop. So if you want to be entered into the drawing to win one of my 2 prizes, please leave a comment below. One of the prizes is a $25 Simon Says stamp, and that could be for USA or international mailing. The second prize is 2 Catherine Pooler inks, and unfortunately those are only for USA. So when you are leaving a comment below, please make sure you indicate international or USA. The drawing for this video will be on February the 26th, and I will leave a link below for you to come back and check out the winning post. Now I also will be giving a prize away to one of the people that leaves a comment on this video. I'm going to be offering a $25 gift certificate to Scrapbook.com. But I'm not going to actually do the drawing until I reach 2,000 subscribers. I'm pretty close, so I'm hoping that you're going to help me meet that milestone. Now remember, in order to qualify the prizes, you have to leave a comment on this video, and you also have to be a subscriber to my channel. So don't forget to do both. If you're interested in any of the products that I've used to create this card, I will leave them in the links below. You can also click the link in the video description below to check out the next person on the list. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.